All right, good evening, and yet again, good evening, everyone. You already know who it is, but I don't mind giving you a slight reminder. It's your best friend, your good Judy, your next door neighbor, your niece, your cousin, your nephew, and I've recently been promoted to great auntie. This is Norman J. Liverpool IV, and I want to thank you for tuning into another edition of What's the LGBT. So tonight we have a jam-packed show for you, and we're just going to dive right in here. But first, we got a couple of housekeeping things to take care of first. First, I want to talk a little bit about our sponsor, which is Lashes by Juicy Beauty Bundles. Juicy Beauty Bundles provides premium mink eyelashes available in 2 styles. You can email juicybeauty@gmail.com. Please peep the spelling. It is BEAUTEE. juicybeauty@gmail.com. Coming soon to Juicy Beauty, House of Beauty Premium Bundles. You can follow them on Instagram at Juicy Beauty Bundles _by Unique for updates and unforgettable giveaways. So we want to thank Juicy. She actually gave me a set of lashes, a couple of sets yesterday. So we want to, just shout you out. Thank you, Juicy Beauty Bundles, for being our sponsor on this evening. So as you know, we already are in the midst of my 5-week signature mentorship program, which is called Evolve. So you've missed this one, but we have another cycle that's going to start on September 14th. So I want to talk just really briefly about what my promises are to you with working with me. 1, you're going to unleash your unicorn power. 2, you're going to stand out and shine. 3, you're going to own your story. And last but not least, you're going to walk in next level confidence. So you may be saying, Norman, I want to work with you, but I don't want to do the 5-week mentorship program. That's totally fine. I am now offering monthly hot seat coaching packages where you work with me one-on-one. You're going to find your voice, choose your impact, and share your story. I would like to invite you to book an exploration call so that we can see if working together is a good fit. You can email me at norman@overthetopliving.com. That is norman@overthetopliving.com. So I do have a disclaimer before we get into our show. The views and opinions expressed by the guest of What's the LGBT are their own, excuse me, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the show What's the LGBT or Norman J. Liverpool as a brand. I also want to say that tonight's topic is sensitive and may not be suitable for everyone. So we just want to make sure that because some of the topics are going to be of a sexual nature. So really interesting. So a couple of weeks ago, you guys had an opportunity to meet someone who's becoming a good friend of mine, an author, Todd Kane. So he is our artist spotlight for this week. Todd is an author. He is an activist. Everything. He's also a coach to the LGBTQIA community and its allies. And he's the author of the book, Hide and Seek, There's No Truth in Fear. And I invited him to come on the show to briefly tell us a little bit about his book and why it is so appropriate that he joins us tonight. So without further ado, if you would please welcome our LGBTQ Spotlight author, Todd Kane. You're muted.
How's that?
There we go. Now we're cooking with gas.
Talk about needing your voice. All right. Well, thanks for having me, Norman. Good to be back.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. So tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, Hide and Seek, There's No Truth in Fear. It's a memoir. I spent nearly 50 years playing a complex and exhausting game of hide and seek with my own truth. Hiding my sexuality, my fears, my desires, my dreams even, because of words I heard when I was younger. Words matter, and even more so today. How we say them, when we say them, what we say. It's even more important to children to watch what we say. Kids don't really discern between a joke or sarcasm. And those words that I heard made me feel less than, just like words do now today when I hear something that makes me feel less than. And when we hear those things, we hide. And we hide often in dark places. And what do you find in dark places when you seek answers? Dark things. So this really is a memoir from 5 to 50 of those significant events in my life that played upon and played out based on things that I heard and things I told myself, things that I believed erroneously, all the fears that I had, and how they led to me making the decisions that I made. I think it's interesting to know how we become who we are. I'm responsible for every choice I made in my life. I own them in the book. There's no victim in it. I'm very proud of that. But it's interesting to find out the events in my life that led me to make those choices. And once I knew where they came from, I was able to forgive myself and many people that affected me in my life. You know, I think at the end of the day, what we say is really who we are. And it's important now more than ever and always to think before we speak and to be mindful of who's around us. What you think is funny could be damaging, even deadly. So this book, I think one of the most profound things about it is that there is no truth in fear. I think all the things that I was afraid of, that my father would reject me, that my mother would reject me, my lovers would reject me, all those things were not true. Now there are monsters out there in this world, and there are things to be afraid of, but your truth should not be one of them. It will set you free.
And, you know, as I shared, I think on one of my videos, I actually purchased the book and was really, really excited to get right into it. But as I began to work my way through the beginning, I was like, there's some more people that want to hear this. And so what we've kind of partnered up and done is we're starting a book club, and we're inviting all of you to join our book club. Now we're limiting this to only 10 spots. And I believe we have 1 or 2 that have already been filled. So at the conclusion of the live today, I will have the Amazon link in the comments. We invite you to go to Amazon, support this member of our community who is being vulnerable, sharing his story with all of us, and join the conversation. And what's going to be really cool about it is whoever joins the book club, we're actually going to record an episode of this show, all of us together collectively, so that way we can discuss our feelings, how the book made us feel, but also to kind of add to Todd's story. And so I'm really excited about that. Our goal is for everyone to have their book in hand by Wednesday, so we can get the discussion popping. So if you have any more questions, Todd, can you tell us your website on where they can find out more about your book?
Yeah, you can go to iamtoddkane.com/book. It's all there. It talks a bit about me. It talks about the book. You can do a little preview. You can go to Amazon and buy it. It's also available on Barnes & Noble. You can get it through your Kindle or a hard copy or a paperback. The interesting thing about this book, what is so beautiful about it, is I've done so many different things in my life. I've been married to a woman, been married to a man, I have kids, military. I've been in private sector, public sector, all these different things. So there's something to be touched on with everybody. I lived my life in many ways as an imposter. And I lived that heteronormative world. At some point, I was even a bully. You know, all these things to hide and protect myself. And I think there's something in it for everyone. There's something in it for everyone. So don't be afraid that if you're not this or you're not that, you're a human being. And what we have to share matters to all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Todd. We're going to hear more from Todd a little bit later on in the show. Go to www.iamtoddkane.com/book. Get the book, y'all. Get the book. Get the book. Get the book. Okay. And join our book club. We're really excited to just kind of learn more about each other. And you will be invited to the exclusive Facebook group. And we're just going to get it on and popping. So we're going to breeze through this next part because I'm ready to bring on all my special guests and have a kiki. So, you know, each week I like to do a little bit of research. And before I get into the research, if you are in the room, hit share. Hit share. Let me see some hearts, likes, loves. If you hate it, share it 5 times. Okay. So I want to definitely make sure that we get the message out there. So according to an article written in 2018 by HIV.gov, approximately 1.2 million people in the US were living with HIV. And about 14% of them, which is 1 in 7, did not even know it and needed to be tested. HIV continues to have a disproportionate impact on certain populations, particularly racial and ethnic minorities and gay and bisexual men. An estimated 36,000 new HIV infections occurred in the United States in 2018. In 2018, 38,000 people received an HIV diagnosis in the US and 6 dependent areas, an overall 7% increase compared to 2014. According to the latest estimates from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, annual infections in the U.S. have been reduced, though, by 2/3 since the height of the pandemic in the 1980s. However, the CDC data indicates that the progress has stalled in recent years at about 38,000 new HIV infections every year between 2014 and 2018. So when we're talking about HIV incident, according to this article, by age group, the annual number of HIV infections in 2018 compared with 2014 decreased among persons 13 to 24, but remained stable among other age groups. The annual number of HIV infections compared between 2014 and 18 decreased among persons of multiple races, but remained stable for all other races and ethnicities. In 2018, Blacks made up 45% of HIV new cases, followed by Hispanics and Latinos at 22%, and persons of multiple races at 19%. I just can't get over these statistics. Gay and bisexual men are the population that are most affected by HIV in the US. In 2018, 69% of new cases were men who have sex with men. Black and African American gay and bisexual men were 25% of that. So I wanted to share that, as well as this last little tidbit. Transgender people have experienced increases in HIV diagnosis. From 2014 to 18, the number of diagnoses of HIV infection for transgender male to female and transgender female to male adults and adolescents increased. So I know that's a lot of information, but I like to get all of that out there because this is why it is important that we're having this conversation today. So without further ado, Todd is getting more love. Thank you, Anthony and Stephen for tuning in with us on tonight. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce my special guest. Now, for those of you who know me, already know who this person is, Henny. Okay, this is my twin, when I tell you a Judy, good Judy. Honey, Marvin Alexander is a makeup artist and hairstylist in New York City. Not only is he skilled with the brush, but his zest for life and all things in it sets a tone for all those around him. Marvin's passions include understanding and implementing true self-care, career ambitions, and advocacy for his community, whether that be his recovery community, his LGBTQIA community, or some variation thereof, to name a few. Marvin has been in recovery from crystal meth and all other mood or mind-altering substances for 7 years. Currently, in addition to managing his successful beauty career, I could just literally hear him writing this, he is the activities chair for an anonymous fellowship. Marvin hopes to encourage others to live their lives to the fullest, no matter who is watching, and to continue being an outspoken advocate that you too can have the life of your dreams. My next guest is Nick Paulos. You know him. He was in our show last week on body positivity. He is 39 years old. He's a Boston native. He has been living with HIV for 12 years. He identifies as gender fluid, LGBT and HIV AIDS activist. He is also a drag queen, pagan, and a social worker, and all-around sarcastic smartass. He currently is working at HCAP and CHII, which is the Drug Assistance Program for people living with HIV and AIDS. My next guest, I'm really excited to learn more about. Alexander James is the founder of Live Loved Coaching, where he unites selectively single gays with their soulmate in 6 months. He lives in Asheville, North Carolina, and is soon to be a dog dad. And last but certainly not least, my sis, Miss Crystal Cassadine, who's a 31-year-old trans woman living in Tacoma. She spent the majority of her adult life advocating on behalf of the LGBTQ plus culture and is ridiculously excited to add HIV and AIDS to her growing list of causes. She was diagnosed in 2019 and feels she has overcome so much within the past year. Her story may be short, but it is not without the drama of a true lifetime movie. I could literally hear her saying that too. So, without further ado, I would like to bring my special guests on. We have Marvin and Alexander and Nick and Crystal and Todd. We have a full house tonight, don't we?
I know,
We
we're like the
do.
Brady Bunch.
So, and also, guys, I want to just ask that you be patient with me. We're trying out some new technology, so you may hear a little bit of feedback, but we're working on that. Do not leave the room, okay? I can control all the sound. So let's just go around the room and allow everyone to introduce themselves. We're going to go ahead and start with Marvin, my good Judy. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, Norman, I love you, honey. I'm so excited to see all of the amazing things that you're doing, right? Like, it's just a breath of fresh air to see a Black, successful gay man, honey, just living his life,
Yeah.
you know? And, speaking of being good Judy's, right? Like, years ago, I was just hoping and dreaming of a fabulous career, right? I live in New York City. I'm a born and bred farm boy, right? Like from the Midwest. Grew up with dreams of being a hairdresser and being a makeup artist, right? And so I'm so blessed that I get to live that dream here in New York City. I have an amazing group of friends in my recovery community where we support each other. You'll find out some more of my story, but like part of my story is like I was really crazy, right? Like really crazy for many years. And it's just such a gift to be able to be an asset to another human being's life, right? And so I get to sponsor people and I get to be sponsored and I just get to live my life to the fullest and it's a dream.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Marvin, for joining us. We look forward to hearing more from you. Next, we have Alexander James. Tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend. Oh, wait, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go. We got it. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be on the show. I'm really grateful for this opportunity, Norman. As you already said, I'm a life coach. I specialize in working with gay relationship coaching, and I show gay and queer men how to create a soulmate relationship in 6 months. I am a recent resident of Asheville, North Carolina, and I've been spending a lot of time hiking out on trails. And I'm also originally from Ohio, so I'm another farm boy like Marvin. And funnily enough, Marvin, I didn't know that about you, but I also used to live in New York City, and I also used to be a makeup artist. So we have a lot in common, and it seems like we've all lived a few lifetimes here. So, and I was diagnosed with HIV in 2016. Is when I found out that I was seropositive.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And for all of you gay and queer men who are looking to make that soulmate connection in 6 months, we're going to share some contact information on how you can get in touch with Alexander James. So thank you so much for being here. Nick, what's the tea, honey?
Oh, hey, I'm back. Couldn't keep me away for very long. I'm back. So, so I was diagnosed in 2008, so 12 years ago. As I said in my profile, I'm Boston born and bred and bred and bred. Sorry, it's a little inside joke for those who get it. Like I said, I have spent, 11 out of 12 of my years of being positive, active, speaking and talking and working in the HIV field. I took a little break for a couple of years. But even before that, when I was 16, I started going out into the city and I discovered youth programs and I learned about HIV and AIDS and I started educating people on protecting yourself from HIV and AIDS. I was an SDAA HIV coordinator for some of the youth programs here in Boston. And then when I became HIV positive, I flipped that around and started teaching people how to live openly and positively and about how to take care of themselves. And we can go further into that, but that's kind of my introduction a little bit.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you back, Nick. I feel like you may just be like a resident of the What's the LGBT
I'll pack my
show.
bags.
Okay, I love it. Thank you. Now, Miss Crystal Cassadine in Tacoma. What's the tea, honey?
Not much. It's hot as Satan's ball sack out here. Oh my God. It's
Girl,
ridiculous.
you need to get you some of that central air conditioning.
Baby, oh my word. But hey, peoples, I'm Crystal. Like you said, I currently live in Tacoma, Washington, diagnosed in, as a matter of fact, June 4th of 2019, so just over a year. I work and I come home, so there's not much more to say other than what was in the bio. But I'm excited to be back, and I'm excited to share what little bit of a story I do have.
Well, I am so appreciative of this. And so it does seem like we have some little feedback situation. So I'm going to be clicking away at muting and unmuting, and that's totally fine tonight. So I want to start by asking the question, how has becoming or knowing that your HIV status, and I'm going to preface this by saying, so back in 2012, when me and Marvin met, we were volunteering at the Gay and Lesbian Center, and at that point, I had kind of heard about HIV, but I kind of started going to the center more for the social aspect. And Marvin was actually one of the first people that really showed me and helped me understand the importance of getting tested. And he said, Norman, whether you're negative or positive, you have a status. And you should know what that status is. And so that is something that I have never forgotten about. It's something that has been ingrained in my heart literally since 2012. So let's kick this off with saying, how has your diagnosis, how has that changed, made a difference in your life? And we're going to go ahead and start with Alexander James.
All right. I'll always remember the day that I tested positive. And I remember out of everything that day, there are two moments that really stick out to me. One was seeing how nervous the doctor was when I came in the room and he was going to have to tell me that I was HIV positive. I could literally feel his nervousness. But the other moment that's super lucid in my mind was a nurse who turned to me and she said, listen, I know this isn't going to make any sense to you right now, but I want you to know that this is going to be one of the best things that ever happens to you. And it didn't make sense to me. I was like, you're insane. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But I think that for me, at that moment in my life, I was in New York City. I was working in fashion. I was doing really well in my career. I was working backstage, working near like lots of supermodels. And I had this life that felt very glamorous. And suddenly I couldn't get it out of my mind, this idea that like, if this were the 1980s or the 1990s, like somebody would be talking to me about planning my funeral. And that I would be figuring out how much time I had left and making arrangements, and that like my legacy would be complete, right? And so for me, what my HIV diagnosis really did was it got me really clear on the contributions that I was making. And it felt like for me, the second opportunity to go back into my life, I felt like I was getting a second chance to really decide how I want to live and what I want to leave and what am I going to create that's going to live on past me. Because for the first time, I was in my 20s, it was like, for the first time, I really realized that I was going to die. And so that led me to quit my career in fashion. I left and I went backpacking through Southeast Asia for 6 months. I came back, I started a career, life coaching, and I went public with my story around HIV. And all 3 or 4 of those things really impacted the way that I see life and my experience of being alive and my experience of aliveness in my life, if that makes sense.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Marvin, how has your diagnosis made a difference? made a difference in your life?
It's really interesting. I hear other people's experience around when they find out. And I found out in 2010, November 1st. And I had just recently relocated from Orlando to Las Vegas. And I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at the diagnosis because I knew who I was and I knew how I showed up in spaces. I was a heavy IV crystal meth user. And so when I was in active addiction, it didn't matter how I got the drug. It didn't matter who I used the drug with, as long as I had it, right? And so if you were positive, I didn't care if I was high. If the needle was used, I didn't care as long as I got mine, right? And so when she came back and she told me of the diagnosis, she goes, I said, okay. Like, okay, girl, like, is there anything else I need to know in this moment? And she's like, you don't seem surprised. I'm like, if you knew my story like I know my story, you wouldn't be surprised. And I just kind of left it at that for a long period of time. Never really letting an HIV diagnosis affect how I moved through space, right? And it wasn't until in 2017, I was 4 years clean at that point. 2017 is when I went on HIV medication. And it was in that moment that my time to process actually hit home. Because like every 3 months I go to the doctor, we do labs, we do the song and dance number about getting on medication and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, it's something I do 4 times a year. But having to take a pill every single day in the beginning of that time was really emotional. It was really heavy because I have a long history of being forced to take psychiatric medication. And so I've done a lot of work around mental health to not have to take psychiatric medication. And so having to take a pill every single day because of behavior that I was participating in while a using addict was hard for me. That was hard for me. And that's when I really processed my HIV diagnosis, which was 7 years after my diagnosis.
Wow. I never knew that. I never knew that you didn't start taking medicine until 2017. Wow.
Yeah, they always, because of my involvement in things like the empowerment and some of the other HIV services in Las Vegas, I knew what my numbers were, and I was very attuned to how slowly progressing my viral load was. My viral load the entire time was never above 5,000, and some people get diagnosed and they're above 1 million. And my viral load was never, not even at the height of my drug use, was above 5,000. And so slowly my T cells began to drop like over time, and it took 7 years for them to get around the 350 area. And once I got there, that's when I decided, okay, like now I'll go on medicine.
Wow. So I want to talk to Crystal because Crystal, you were very open about your story being relatively new. You were just diagnosed last year. So how has in this year, just a little bit over a year, how has this made a difference in your life?
I'm ridiculously attuned to how many sharp objects are around. Like I actually found out via giving plasma. I was going through a really, really hard time and needed extra money. So when I gave plasma, I went back a couple of weeks later. They're like, well, no, you can't give. I'm just like, why? And so they took me into the nurse's office, for lack of a better word. And she was like, you're HIV positive. And I'm just like, okay, I can't make a scene in this lady's office. So my best friend was actually outside in the car, and I had to sit there and wait for him to finish giving plasma before I ever got a chance to get out of the building in the first place because he had the damn keys. So we sat down and I just started bawling. He's like, "What's wrong?" And I gave him the paper. He was like, okay. He's freaking out too. Um, I didn't realize how much it was going to affect me mentally until I started going back to work. I was the electronics department manager at the Walmart, and in the photo lab, we have blades that we're supposed to use to cut the different photos to size and whatnot. And it was not uncommon for me to nick myself. And every time I would nick myself and I would start to bleed, I would freak completely out. I'm just like, I'm not gonna lie. At the time I was still very ignorant to pretty much the entire HIV encyclopedia. I was like, if this gets anywhere, people are gonna come by, they're gonna swipe their hand across it or whatever, they're gonna pick it up, and then I've got that on my conscience. So for a good 3 or 4 months, I spent, I would say 80% of my time just disinfecting everything. It had to be clean and it had to be disinfected before I would leave the room, just to be on the safe side. Even now, I have little moments where I'm just like, okay, well, it's okay, Crystal, you're not gonna die. You're not gonna give it to anybody, because I am up on my meds. I am undetectable. I am in the green, so to speak. But it's made me hyper aware to certain things that I didn't think I would be hyper aware to. Like I said, to sharp objects, to the way other people perceive it, and the fact that, like like you mentioned earlier, when we were backstage, I screenshot my Grindr comments and whatnot. Like, I don't know how, I'm a very abrasive person. I don't know how to really educate people. So it's like, I take those little moments and I post them and just like, don't fucking do this. This is ridiculous. With the way that people approach you and whatnot. Like, it's taught me to be more self-aware rather than cringy, I guess is a good way to put it. It's been very liberating.
And it's very interesting that you say that use that word liberating, because as Alexander James was saying, that the nurse told him that this is going to be, a turning point in your life and, a good thing. And so I want to bring it over to Todd before we make our way back around to Nick. So Todd, talk to us a little bit about the concept of this going from being a blessing, going from being a curse to a gift.
Well, I was diagnosed in 2002. I was 14 years old in 1983 when AIDS hit, when people wouldn't drink from drinking fountains, they wouldn't touch door handles, the word fag, murderer, horrible, everything was there. And it was about the time when I was thinking that I could maybe go ahead and live my life again, go to college, do those type of things. I liked both men and women. I felt comfortable with both, but I had this desire and this, I think just in that age, you're just closer to boys anyway. And so I was in this thing, all of a sudden this happened and I had to make a choice. I say in the book, truth never loses its power, only its voice, and it lost its voice that time. I was terrified. Fast forward, and then you see Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, and I was a very thin, wafy kid. I was always worried about that. I decided, I just chose to go the hetero route, and I fell in love with a woman, and was with her 18 years. She's still one of my best friends. I do her hair. Love her to death. If there's a life partner, that's who she is. But in 2002, I had left the military and I was running my father's company. I came out. And I remember this feeling all my life that I just wanted someone to love me. I wanted people to love me, like me, respect me, and don't know my secrets. So I was always trying to please people, morphing into whatever I needed to do, sometimes a shapeshifter, sometimes an imposter. And then I came out and I had my truth. Woohoo! I was, oh my God, I'm an integrity. So I went from, I just want everybody to love me, to, I don't care who loves me. I'm living my truth now. In 45 days, I was infected. And then I went from, I want everybody to love me, to I don't care who loves me, to no one is going to love me again. I felt like poison. I was devastated. I suffered trauma from it. There's actually about 3 or 4 months of that time I don't remember. I remember feeling like poison and that I deserved it. And you talk about anything about being around. I remember the day that I got the call to come to get my test. there's a story about it too. And it was a week late, and I cut my hand. I knew.
Wow.
Same thing. The doctor's like, well, I heard that, Magic Johnson and blah, 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 all these things. And so I lived with that. And I really didn't come to terms with it really deeply and realize it was a gift until I turned 50.
Wow. Well, we're going to come back to that gift portion because I feel like I've never heard that, like what Alexander James was saying, that the nurse said this is going to be, the best thing that happened to you, and that that concept is actually very eye-opening to me in relationship to how you're moving through that. So we're definitely going to come back to that. But I want to ask Nick. So Nick, I understand that you work in this. This is what you do. So when we're dealing with disclosure and the comfort level of disclosure, what does that look like? I mean, not just in your own personal story, but in the people that you work with. Like, how have you seen the transition from, years ago to now with the people's ability to be comfortable with disclosing?
I am fortunate enough to currently work for what is known as ADAP in the most of the country, but here in Massachusetts it's called HDAP. So I work for the Drug Assistance Program for people living with HIV and AIDS, and so we do co-payment insurance where we provide, when you go to get your medications, we are the payer of last resorts, and so you can get your medications without a copay. And we also have our CHI program, which also helps pay for insurance premiums and for people living with HIV as well. So I have the privilege of working for an organization that 100% of our work, 95% of our work is with HIV positive people. Not necessarily employed by, but the heart of the organization is for clients who are HIV positive. We do have a TB and TB program that helps people get TB medications when they're diagnosed with TB. And that's why I say 95%, because that program you don't have to be HIV specific. And we also have a PrEP-DAP program, which also helps people who are negative get on PrEP and Descovy. And so that's the other 5% there. But the heart of our work is with HIV positive people. So I get fortunate enough to work for an organization that mindset is already accepting. But I have, like Todd, I've worked in both nonprofit and for-profit. And when I work in nonprofit, I worked at AIDS Action here in Boston. I worked at Cambridge Cares About AIDS, which is a company I started working for right after my diagnosis. And my job actually was related to being HIV positive. I was a peer educator when I started at AIDS Action. Well, it's Cambridge Cares, but they were bought out by AIDS Action, now bought out by Fenway. So nonprofits tend to get absorbed by other nonprofits because of funding streams. So I fortunately have worked for HIV/AIDS organizations. So being out in those places is so much easier and so much more. Usually, there's always one or two staff members that are positive, so you do have coworkers that are positive. So it's very nice to have that commonality as well as a professional environment. But then you work in places like I worked at a very famous international coffee shop for a couple of years, and I'm not going to say the name, but we can all figure out what it is. It's a green cup. And talking about talking about my status there and needing time off for doctor's appointments and stuff like that was a lot harder. And I knew what I would have to do it eventually, and I am comfortable with my status that I don't give a crap about people's opinions. And I also know the laws around what I'm protected by here in Massachusetts, which is a great state for rights and protections and liberties here for LGBT and positive people. So unfortunately, I live in a state that's really, really great for that. I know that not everybody does, and that's also an issue we face. And not everyone has the health care that we have here in Massachusetts, which is another big problem across this country. So that being said, for me, it's been hard when I work for profits or for corporations, because the mindset isn't so accepting and liberal. But when I work for these nonprofits, you usually have the people who care. You usually have people who have passion about other people and care about the human condition and whatever you may be facing, whether it's HIV, cancer, diabetes, anxiety, depression, whatever. So when you work in an environment that's nonprofit, you tend to find people who are more accepting and open-minded. And I don't know if I have time to touch on the piece about HIV being like a savior. For me, a little bit about what happened to me during my time. I'm a child of the 80s as well, so I grew up with that stigma of my dad was a born again Christian, and so from the moment that I knew I was gay, which was at like 6 years old, I knew that I was going to be facing problems, and I came out at 13, which was in 1994. When I was 16, when I came out again because my dad and mom didn't accept it, and I was sent to therapy, and I went closeted again. But at 16, I came full out of the closet again. My dad told me that I was going to get AIDS and die, and so because that's what gay men do, they get AIDS and die. And this was in the 90s, and so I always had this mindset that I was going to get AIDS and I was going to get HIV. And I mean, back then it was AIDS, but you got AIDS. You didn't get HIV. You didn't know about HIV. You just knew about AIDS. Like it wasn't
Right.
that transition step. Um, and when I was 16, I came out and I started going to Boston. I started joining these youth groups, and I was passionate about educating myself about HIV because I knew that I was going to get it. I just had this feeling I was going to get it. So from 18 to 20, I I did everything I could. I became a heart educator, which is a health education and risk reduction trainer, and I learned everything I could. In my 20s, I dated somebody who was positive for a couple of years, and after we broke up, I didn't become positive because of him. Um, it, but I had comfortability dating him because he was positive, because of the education that I had sought out.
That's a
Not a lot
really
of people.
interesting point about about when you talk about the you know the comfortability with disclosure and dating someone who is positive. And so I want to pose the concept or the thought of how do you deal with, and we're going to go back to Marvin, how do you deal with people who are unkind or who are not knowledgeable about this when you're disclosing? Like, what does that process look like?
I have to take a moment and laugh because Norman, you know me, and I'm just an in-your-face kind of a person, and I just tell it how it is. And so my tolerance level for ignorance is very little, for a multitude of different reasons. A, because I just don't put up with BS in my life at all. I just don't have time for it. And B, you know, I personally would prefer to date people who are already positive, because like that brings in a comfortability level for me. It brings in an open and honest dialogue that we can have. There's another commonality that we share there. You know, I'm not opposed to dating somebody who is negative, but for me, I live a very different life than what I used to live. Before I could care less, like if I was positive or if you were positive, like those things never came up in conversation because like it wasn't important, you know. And I'm undetectable, but even still, that one like minuscule percent that's there of a possible transmission, that would be heartbreaking to knowingly on accident do it to someone else. You know what I mean? And so I would prefer a partner of mine, to be positive, you know. But as far as people being nasty and things like that, I move through space and I command space. So I don't really allow, it's funny because I don't really allow for that type of energy to come to me. You know what I mean? There are some people that move through space and they're a little bit more timid, or maybe they don't have as much information, or maybe they're uncomfortable with their status and they're just not sure how to approach certain topics. I can sometimes be like a bull in a china shop, and I just like bulldoze right over the whole conversation. Like when I disclosed my status to my mom, I said, just to let you know, I'm HIV positive, and here's why I'm not on meds, here's my viral load, here's my T-cell count, me and my doctors are having full conversations, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Like, I answered all of her questions before she could even, like, raise an eyebrow. Like, she had all of the information. So that's just kind of how I move through conversations with people. I'm a firm believer in disclosing my status on a one-on-one basis, right? For me, like I didn't share the conversation or like the flyer for this show simply because like I'm comfortable with my status, but I know that I don't live in a bubble with just Marvin by himself, and my sister and my parents and my grandparents are all on my social media, and you know they may not be as informed as I am. They may not know that a nick or a cut is not going to transmit the virus from me, right? Or models or photographers or, you know, clients. They may not have the information. So I prefer to be one-on-one so that way I can communicate and educate, because I know what I know and you don't know what you don't know. So I want to be able to be there. I want to be able to be there and like provide you with that resource, and for you to be able to see like it's like diabetes, or you know, it's just another disease that's out there. It's nothing that's catastrophic and nothing to be afraid of, you know?
I love that. And so I want to touch on something because we have Alexander James here, and you know, he's talking about connecting people, selectively single gay and queer men to their soulmates in 6 months. And so in your work, Alexander James, how does this affect people in the dating space? Like even when you're dealing with people who are, you know, maybe in a situation where one partner is positive or not, but just in general, how does this disclosure, dealing with all of this, how does this affect, in your opinion, the dating game?
That's an amazing question. And I feel like for me personally, I'll start with my own story. I coach a lot of men with HIV around this topic, specifically because it is one that keeps people out of having the intimacy that they want in their relationships at times. And so it's a work that I've done, it's a place where I've done a lot of work on myself and had to really be intentional with the way that I think about my own status and sharing my status. And there's no one size fits all for how to disclose or for how to have these conversations. It's so unique. And so for me, in my own dating life, one of the things that I found protected me the most was actually being really upfront and out loud about my HIV status. Because if I have it on my profile and everybody in my Facebook knows and everybody on my Instagram knows, like there's no approaching or creating a relationship with somebody who that's going to be a huge issue for them, right? So so one of the ways that I kind of clear the field, right, is what I talk about. It's like, if you're not, I say, if you aren't turning off a lot of people in your dating life, then you're definitely not turning on the right people, right? If you're watering yourself down to be palatable to the masses, like what's the person who's really looking for you can't find you because you're not showing up.
That is a word.
And so tweet it. So for me, and for I think a lot of gay men and for everybody who's HIV positive in general, figuring out the way to have the conversation that feels authentic to you and that feels like it honors you. I would say that our actions aren't conversations we're having with other people. Any action you take is actually a conversation you're having with yourself about yourself. And so the way that I have the people that I work with think about it is, what are you telling yourself about yourself by the way you're going about your diagnosis and sharing it with other people? And do you like your reason, right? I'm not here to tell you have to do it any certain way, but just make sure you like your reasons and make sure the message you're sending to yourself about yourself is one that you really
Mind blown. Mind blown. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Todd, you were talking about, when you were a teenager in the 80s, that this was a totally different type of situation. And so how did that affect you moving into relationships with other men, having been around in this time where, like Alexander James had said, if it had been years prior, he would have been talking about his funeral. So talk to us a little bit about kind of that journey from how we got from that to where we are now, where it's not that death sentence. It's not that the way that it was.
Unmute.
Oh, unmute yourself.
You pushed the button.
Sorry.
Well, I took an 18-year hiatus because I did marry my ex-wife, and we had 2 beautiful kids, and I just had that life, and I loved her. And if anybody's asking, I never had her do a certain position or lower her voice. I was in love with this woman, and that's the life that we had. Right. That's possible. I was very fortunate to be able to love a woman too, and still love women in that way. So I was able to do that. Now, fast forward to 2003, and then the diagnosis, and then just the transition from leaving that marriage to into the relationships. It was interesting to face mortality in what I think now feels like an invincibility culture. I think people today think they are invincible, and that is not the case. Regardless of whether you have PrEP or anything else, it is still a disease. It is still something you carry with you. So I had that feeling, and I carried that with me. I was 32 years old. I was a gay baby. I was a child on a freeway. I was a white man with means,
okay,
not bad to look at, not equipped to do. I'm just being not equipped to do what I wanted to do. Most gay people are maybe a month or like a couple years behind emotionally. I was 18 years behind emotionally, and I when I sat in a bar and had a drink with a man, a beer, I had a beer and I had a conversation with him, because that's what you do. No, that's a whole different book. Being nice in a gay bar, that just doesn't work. So that invincibility thing was difficult for me to deal with. And to Alexander's point about having a fulfilling sexual relationship, position choices that were less threatening, right? Masculine, feminine energy, making choices like that were less not fulfilling to me, but giving. That became me morphing. That became me pleasing. Again, I went from one secret to another. And so that really wasn't very fulfilling relationships for me, because my energy was masculine and feminine, whatever it was, top, bottom, whatever made that person feel more comfortable, regardless of what I wanted. I wasn't living my truth. That was that. And I want to bring up this point too, Marvin was talking about how he approaches and walks into a room and deals with that. I completely agree with that. I also have learned and have studied how words matter. And we need to take the time to be a little more patient when teaching people how to address us, because we can save future bad experiences by just taking a moment and say, if you approached it this way, it would have been better. Maybe you don't have your little thing. You could bang them on the head if you want to, but the next person's going to get that. And we want that person to be in our culture and communicate effectively and be a loving source of our family and on our team, right? So taking that time, especially people who have gone through the fire and come out baptized by steel, right? This is what we are. To take that time to share with them and say, listen, this is how you talk to us about it. I get it. Learn from this lesson. Next time I'll slap you, bitch. But in this situation,
okay,
you want to help them. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. So Robert says, I'm not a person living with HIV, but I'm a single man in our toxic hookup culture. And when I opt into consensual sex with another man, I value the honesty of disclosure. And 10 out of 10 times, that man is always welcome to come through. And I think that definitely, plays a part. But so we're talking about, kind of moving into the sex space. So we're just going to just go there because we're like knocking at the door kind of. So one of the topics that we were talking about or that we kind of discussed in our group chat was top and bottom energy and compromising to avoid rejection. So I'm going to let you just kind of, if you would just give us a brief, like why that came to your mind, and then we're going to move around the room. But Todd, since you brought that up, can you tell us what do you mean by top and bottom energy and compromising to avoid rejection?
Well, I think all my life I had been a pleaser. I wanted to be loved. I was keeping a secret. I was doing all these things, and it manifested in my relationships, sexual as well. And then when you talk about the beginning of AIDS and everything else, the less threatening was the bottom, right? If you're topping, you're less likely to get it, to receive it. Now there's a lot of myths and everything else to claim it, but in the beginning that was a strong thing. I think Nick can agree. It was about how you did it and when you did it and everything else you did it. And so although I had and needed a lot of masculine energy for my own self-esteem, I would give that up, and I would bring bottom energy to it, and I would, and in many ways, I would, if you want to use submit, but it is a different energy when you're on the receiving end of that, and there are times in my relationships that I want that I want to feel that type of energy, so I'm fine with that, but in the beginning, I would just surrender that and be that, because I was less threatening to my partner. In my mind, I was less threatening, and I didn't want that responsibility to make anybody sick or feel bad. And then you get in relationships where they can manipulate that. It just depends. But
wow.
The idea is the top and bottom energy, the masculine and feminine energy, and that's a very big deal, part of my life, and I've identified it and talk about it a lot when I coach. What are you bringing in, and what do you need, and can you give and receive that way? But to sacrifice that need for that masculine energy, that power, can be very devastating to you, and it can create resentment.
Now, Crystal, I saw you over there nodding your head. What was going through your mind as you're listening to Todd speak about these energies and things? So I just saw like the wheels were turning there.
I mean, for me, it's a little bit different. Like, I make jokes about it on all different forms of social media about like Tacoma being the land of the bottoms, because there's like 3 tops out of every 6 million of us. But like I said, for me, it's a little bit different. I tend to date and play around with primarily straight men. So the conversation as a whole is completely different for me. There's the whole, okay, well, you understand I'm trans, and this is what that means. And then it goes from that to, well, did you actually read my profile, or do you know, like, yeah, all that good stuff. So I don't necessarily have to surrender to either form of energy, to be completely honest. It's more so out of necessity now, and not to be too vulgar, but if I want to get my rocks off, then I mean, I have to be able to adapt. And it's not as easy being positive all the time. Now, granted, again, dealing with mainly straight men. I have a different, a different tool that I can use, because a lot of guys do see trans women as fetishes, and they're like, "Well, I want to be pegged," basically. And I'm just like, "Oh, okay, so that's what we're doing." Okay, I see. So yeah, it's a lot different for me.
All right. So Nick, last week we talked about body image, and we talked about the image illusion and the toxicity of the way that kind of we think about body image. How does that affect you as an HIV positive person? Like, how does that affect the way that you see your body, the way that you view your body?
Because I fluctuate in weight and I'm not skinny by any chance, that works against me. And then because I'm HIV positive, that also works against me. So it feels like it's a double whammy sometimes, where like because I'm I don't want to consider myself plus size, but I'm not skinny. I have meat on my bones. I fluctuate. I go up and down, and I so for me, it feels like sometimes like before I can even tell somebody my status, I have to get through the weight issue, or and now I'm 39, so I have to get through the age issue. So it's like if it's not one thing, it's like another, and HIV is just always sort of the um but I disclose right off the bat, and so like I actually throw that out first as my curveball, and then I can try to deal with the rest after. But to be truthfully honest, I I'm only a bottom, so like I can control that portion. Like I only talk to I try to only talk to tops. I get some bottoms
Okay.
who I have bottoms hitting me up, but like it's every so often I'm just like, hey, well,
Bro, just very much we could be friends.
right. We can be scissor sisters, but it's not gonna go very far.
No.
Um, like let's share beauty tips. And then I'll cut you out the picture if you get prettier than me.
Okay, but I think it's very interesting that you were talking about how you have to move through these other aspects of weight, age before you get there. Really quick, Adrian, I see your question. We're getting ready to come back to that because I'm going to address that particular question to Todd. But I do have a question from Marvin that came through my website. And it says, Marvin, how did your HIV diagnosis change your mindset on drug use?
It didn't, to be honest with you. I was already an intravenous drug user. I started using intravenously in late 2008 or early 2009. And I didn't stop using intravenously until I got clean in 2013. And so how did it change my usage? It didn't. I wanted to use by any means necessary. Being high was the goal when that was my intention, right? And so it didn't matter if the other person was positive, if I had to share needles. Like I said before, none of that mattered. And so when I got the diagnosis, my behaviors didn't really change because I was already doing at-risk behavior by sharing needles and things like that, and sleeping with people and not asking about statuses or STIs or anything like that. And so that behavior didn't change. I still went to bathhouses. I still hooked up with random people. So the drug use or the HIV diagnosis did not change how I use drugs.
Okay.
When I got clean, I was able to take care of my body, right? I was able to show up to doctor's appointments. I was able to remember where my viral load was, remember where my T cell count was. So it wasn't until I was able to stop using drugs did I actually start to take care of the HIV diagnosis.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So I want to pose this question to Todd. And it's a lot here, so we're going to break this question down to just one question. So let's just answer the first one here. Oh, I guess it is only one question. There was a question and an explanation. Okay. So Adrian, who is also a past guest on our show, he was on our race and relationships episode. He asked, what are your thoughts on HIV and aging? More and more HIV positive people are reaching retirement age, and they're proving that that you don't have an expiration date.
And you give that to me because I'm
well, I
52
mean,
years old.
you're the one who was very open about it.
I'm good. I'm good. Listen, Adrian had to throw out his curveball at 39, so I'm good. Okay, mine's the slow pitch. I'll just toss it out there. No, it's all good. Thank you, Adrian, for that question. So it's just part of aging. It's part of me. We talked about it being a curse to a gift. I think I've taken care of myself even more so, knowing that, feeling that mortality. And I also had some body dysmorphia. I was worried about losing my, I was very thin as a kid. The whole movie Philadelphia traumatized me. And then, you know, when you do get older, you do experience face wasting. There are some things that do happen that you can have some breakdown of collagen in your face, and that can be something that makes you look and feel older, and then that goes to your self-esteem. So those are some of those issues. But you know, now more than ever, we have people who do plastic surgery and many organizations that are gay friendly that actually do these procedures for you for free to help you maintain that look good, feel good thing, and live a happier, healthy, more normative life. But the bottom line is you have to be happy with yourself. Retirement. We have a whole generation, 2 generations, 3 in there really, who have gone through the 80s and have survived, and they are warriors, and they have survived. And I hope that more of them come back to share. I think a lot of us went through this window of shame, and we think we don't have anything to share. And we've elevated ourselves from some of these challenges by socioeconomic issues, and maybe kind of figured it out. But the kids today, there's a lot that has changed, but there's a lot that has stayed the same. Shame does not age. Fear does not age, and words matter all the time. I don't care how old you are. You hear the word cocksucker and you're like, Sharon, or faggot, or whatever it is. It's not funny. Fatty, skinny, lesbian, dyke, whatever it is. It's not funny. And we should not use those words in our culture. I love you, drag queens, but this is not a time to make that stuff. It's just not. You know, words matter all the time. And younger people don't understand your sarcasm. So let's clean that up. So
okay, he said let's clean it up.
Clean it up.
So Alex, I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Don't say that stuff in front of me because I'll bring it.
Okay, he said back up, Hetty. So I wanted Alexander James to touch on this, and because I find it fascinating what you do. Like the whole lane that you're in, I think is really, really amazing. And I'm going to turn this over to you while I get my charger because I wasn't charging. So can you talk about the top and bottom energy and compromising to avoid rejection? Like in your work, like what does that look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I go back to when we talk about this top and bottom energy is like, it's very easy to immediately go to like the sexual place and think like, oh, we're just talking about sex, right? But really we're talking about surrender and control. And in every relationship, there's a balance between the two. And whenever there's an imbalance, it creates an environment in the relationship that isn't fully safe. And so the place that I see this top and bottom energy show up a lot is like a lot of the people that I work with have this idea similar to what you dealt with, Todd, is like, well, I've grown up with all of this shame, and like there's really only ever one thought that ever creates shame in us, and that thought is always there's something wrong with me. Right? That's the only thought that ever creates shame. There's something wrong with my body. There's something wrong with my sexuality. There's something wrong with, you know, the way I look or the way I talk. The thought there's something wrong with me is what creates shame. And shame fundamentally lays the foundation for unworthiness in our lives. And so when we have that foundation of unworthiness, we enter relationship seeking to earn our worth. And one of the ways that I think many gay men have learned how to earn their worth is by pleasing other people, right? By trying to gain that validation, by being the funniest person in the group, by being the best dressed, by being the most handsome, having like the 12 pack, whatever it is. It's about trying to earn back that unworthiness that is created, like Todd said, by those words that we hear, by these messages that we get. So I see the bottom and top energy dynamic actually coming out of this place of shame. And oftentimes it will be one person will take the bottom role and try to earn their worthiness. And then the person who takes the sort of top role or the controlling role, like that's also their way of trying to earn or cement in their own mind the worthiness of like, oh, I have this person who wants to please me. Like I have this person who will do anything for me. Like I must be really valuable. And so it's not that there's one that's better than the other, but it's that imbalance that is created by shame and by the foundations of unworthiness that shame creates in our lives.
Baby, when I tell you, Alexander James, you are getting, I mean, mind blown. Wow. Wow. And I really appreciate I really appreciate your perspective on the way that the way that those two communicate to each other, because I think that a lot of times, like you said, we do think of it in a sexual way, not so much of surrender or control. So I definitely appreciate that perspective. We actually have another question for Marvin. It says, Marvin, when you quit using, was sex or intimacy a challenge? And if so, did your status play a role in it? Wait a minute, hold up. Let's dissect this. Okay, so let's answer the first one. When you quit using, was sex or intimacy a challenge?
The short answer is yes. And it's yes because, here's the long answer. Using drugs and having sex were so intertwined, especially with crystal meth. They're so interlaced with each other. And I would perform sex acts in all kinds of places, whether it was in an elevator at Bally's on the Las Vegas Strip, girl, or if it was, at the airport in a bathroom while I was working, or at, it didn't matter where. If I was under the influence coming down on my way up, I would participate in sex acts anywhere. And so when I got clean, I had to learn how to have sex in not those ways. Those ways are bad. It just was so intertwined with how I thought about using drugs that if I had any hope of being able to stay clean, having sex in the shower at the gym was not going to keep me clean. Because what ended up happening in that experience is I ended up at a bookstore afterwards because I didn't get the satisfactory conclusion at the gym shower that I had anticipated. And so I needed to go to a bookstore to finish the process. And in that bookstore, they were using. And so I just needed to change my behavior. So I had to stop having sex the same way that I was having sex when I was using. So no more catcalling, no more inviting boys in off the street, because that became dangerous. I had to pull a knife on somebody to get them out of my home because they did not want to leave. So it was about changing the behaviors for me to learn healthy sexual habits.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, as I mentioned when we started this is a very heavy topic. And so I just want to point out that we will be having a part 2 of this in October, because there's only so much that we can do in an hour and 15 minutes. And so we will definitely be following up on this. But I always like to, as we transition to the end part of the show, I always like to give some advice. I always like to provide as Marvin used to tell me, an area of opportunity, an area of growth, something that, that we can do different. So I want to know first, and this is a 2-part question. I'm sorry, Todd. The first part is, what does it mean to you to be a person living with HIV? And then the second part of that is, what do you tell the person that's watching right now who is like, wow, I can't believe that there's a place where people are talking about HIV in a public forum, like I'm scared or newly diagnosed? What is your advice to them? So again, it's 2 parts. Is what does it mean to you to be a person living with HIV? And then what advice do you give to that person that's watching is like, man, I wish I could be as strong as you, Crystal, or Todd, Nick, Marvin, or Alexander James? So we're going to start with they say ladies first. So Crystal, what does it mean to you to be a person living with HIV?
Pretty much the same thing it means to be trans and a drag queen. I don't see those aspects of my life as defining. I see them as platforms. And if I can use my platform to let someone know that A, they're not alone, B, that there is help, and C, you're not going to die, then that's why I'm here. I was distraught when I found out that I am positive. And for a very long time, when I say long, it's only been a year, but anyway, for a very long portion of that year, I saw myself as a walking biohazard. It's not something that's easy to live with, especially if you don't know what it is. So to that point, my advice would be research. I know it's not everybody's favorite thing to do, but the more you know, the more you know, the more armed you are, and the easier it becomes. Nothing in life is easy. And if it's scary, 9 times out of 10, there's a reason for that. Go to the doctor, go get checked. Don't wait for your meds. You don't know. It's going to affect you differently than it is your best friend. Just because they can go so long without going and starting their meds to live a ridiculously healthy life doesn't mean that you can't. I started feeling the effects of the HIV on my body around the 6 or 7 month mark, is from what my doctor and I kind of whittled it down to the point that I couldn't work. I was constantly leaving work. I was constantly saying, I need to go sit down. So go to the doctor, start your meds, be loyal to your meds, to live what feels like a healthy life. And what is a healthy life, I'm going to say it again, is a healthy life. And then all of a sudden you get sick again, and you're like, well, my meds stopped working. It's mind fucking. Like, it's ridiculous. And it's not something that you really want to put yourself through.
So knowing that, so now that you've experienced that, to that person that's looking at your Instagram, that's going to be sending you a message, what do you say to them?
Love yourself. If you love yourself, you're going to do what you need to do for yourself. Stop allowing yourself to please everyone else. Stop, and I'm actually talking to myself right now. Stop allowing yourself to please everyone else. Stop using your body to find what you think that you need, because you already have what you need inside you. Just love yourself.
I love that. Crystal, it's always such a pleasure to have you on. How many episodes have you been on with me now? 3.
2.
2? Okay. Well, like you and Nick, I feel like you and Nick and Ty, well, we all might just be residents of this show, but thank you so much again for being on. If you want to connect with Crystal, you can connect with her at Chris Cass on Instagram or Crystal Cassadine on Facebook. Now, funny story, Crystal, remember how I told you like a week or 2 ago that I couldn't tag you in post? It was
You're spelling with a C.
Yeah. Yeah. So I realized that today. So it is Crystal with a K. You can find her at Crystal Cassadine on Facebook and at Chris Cass on Instagram. So Crystal, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for, like, you know, we talked about it. You were talking about how new your story is, but I want to thank you because there's people that are watching that have new stories. And I want them to know that there is as Marvin would say, a safe space to move through here on my platform. So I want to thank you for that. And it looks like you have a little, from Andrew. He says, hugs, Crystal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So next, hold on, I'm moving a little bit quicker ahead of myself. So Marvin, what does it mean to be a person living with HIV? And what do you tell that person that's looking to connect with you? Or what do you tell that person that's like, man, I just wish I could have that strength or that courage? What advice do you have for that person?
What does it mean to me? You know, I'm just a human being living this existence, right? And there's nothing that my HIV status It doesn't make me more special. It doesn't make me more superior. It doesn't make me more inferior. It doesn't do anything except for give me a positive HIV status. That's it.
Stop
Right?
the press. I need you to stop right there. Baby, if that was not a word, I'm going to ask you to say that again for those in the back of the house, the people that might have been checking their cell phone real quick. I need you to repeat that because that was a whole word.
I might have to go on the replay. As my therapist used to say, it was a Buddha moment, and now it's gone. Right?
So y'all better watch the replay, honey. Because he dropped
the only thing is like the only thing about my HIV status is that it's positive. It does not change me. It does not make me a better makeup artist. It does not make me a better friend. It does not make me a more inferior lover. It literally is just a positive HIV status. That's it. And so the advice that I have for anyone who could possibly be struggling with drug addiction, could be afraid that their dreams won't come true, nervous about a newly diagnosed HIV status, is that everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. The drugs you can stop, the dreams come true, and the HIV status, with more education and more understanding, it becomes easier to swallow and have a conversation around. So, as I believe it's been said already, it's not a death sentence, right? Like, it's not that anymore, right? And I'm so grateful to the pioneers who came long before me and were taking the experimental medications, and we're going through all of that. And because I was born in the 80s, so I'm definitely not a child of the 80s. So, just give yourself the space to grow. That's the advice that I have, is give yourself the space to grow, because what I've learned and what I've been told is that nothing lasts forever. Good, bad, or indifferent, nothing will last forever. So process your feelings. If you're feeling sad about something, be sad about it. It'll go away. If you're happy about it, be happy about it. It'll go away. Just be with it.
Well, sister, you done let us have it yet again via satellite.
One more time.
So if you want to connect with Marvin, you can connect with him on Instagram at Marvin Alexander Beauty. You can also visit him online at marvinalexanderbeauty.com or marvinalexanderbridal.com. Honey, she scooped up all of the web names. She says if you want to get in contact with her, just type in Marvin Alexander, darling, and you seek and you shall find. So again, I just have to say, Marvin, I'm so happy that you agreed to join this. Like I said, Marvin is my sister, but we have not connected like this in quite some time. Life gets in the way. I got married a couple times, divorced a couple times, which is why I'm going to need to talk to Alexander James after this this broadcast. But I'm so happy that I can call you one of those friends that time can elapse and we can kiki and pick it right back up. So thank you so much. Again, you can visit him at Marvin Alexander Beauty or marvinalexanderbridal.com. All right. Let me see. Who do I have next? Alexander James. I'm going to let y'all unmute yourself because I feel like I'm clicking too much.
Yeah, I got it.
Thank you. See, I put y'all to work. So what does it mean to you to be a person living with HIV, and what advice or what nugget do you have to the person that's watching tonight?
When I was first diagnosed, and I just want to say, being in this space tonight has been so powerful for me, Crystal, hearing your story about being afraid of sharp objects. I never realized that I wasn't the only one that had that, And Todd, you literally stole the words out of my mouth when you said this thought that you had of who's going to love me now? I think these are shared experiences that we don't often have the chance to share because so many people aren't speaking about their status. And so we don't get to realize how alone we aren't, right? How many people there are that understand us. So for me, in doing the work around my status, you know, my best friend in Spain became HIV positive years before I did, and I didn't get it. Right? I was like, what's the big deal? Like, we've got medicine. Why are you freaking out? Why are you crying all the time? Like, it's not a big deal. And I very flippantly said to him one day, I said, you know, if I ever become HIV positive, like, I'll tell everyone. Not knowing that 5 years later, I'd become HIV positive. Right? And that was the first thing that I remembered when I got the diagnosis, was like, I'm going to have to make good on my promise.
Wow.
And so doing the work of coming out to everyone, including my 80-year-old grandmother from Louisiana, about my HIV status, I had to ground into the work. And this is what living with HIV has taught me. And it's the experience that it's gifted me, is that I cannot control what other people think of me, but I can decide to not let what other people think of me control me. And that is where my power is always. So anybody who's listening out there who is struggling with your status, like, I want you to know that somebody else's misperception of you doesn't change you, right? You know the truth of your character, and you know the truth of your heart, and that doesn't change based on whether someone else can see it or not. Yeah, that's it.
Baby, when I tell you, y'all are snatching my wigs completely back. So if you want to connect with Alexander James, you can reach him at Instagram at The Real Alexander James, and on Facebook at Alexander James. And I just want to say, the power of social media is so strong. I mean, you and I connected. I don't even remember how we connected on Facebook. And just to see, like, because I'll be honest, like, at first I was like, oh my God, like, you know, I recently started my coaching business. And then to come into a space where, like, you're a coach, Todd's a coach. And it was a little intimidating for me until I realized that we all kind of have our own lane. We all have the thing that we do. And that's one of the beauties of the things that I've learned from working with my coach, is that we can all eat. You know, there's enough for us to all eat.
Oh,
and
yeah, there's enough people, you know, it's going to take all of us. That's what I always say. It's going to take all of us.
And so I'm just so grateful that you embrace this connection with me. We've never met. We just know each other on social media. And I'm really looking forward to enriching this friendship. And I thank you again for being here tonight. So if you want to reach out to Alexander James, you can do so on Instagram at The Real Alexander James, or at the Alexander James on Facebook.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right, Nick. What does it mean to be a person living with HIV to you? What does it mean to you? And then what advice do you have to the people who are watching you this evening?
Wow. How do I follow up after what everyone said, especially Crystal? Like Crystal and Marvin, what you guys said was, phenomenal. I think of myself as, when I was diagnosed, I was in a dark place, and there's more to my coming out story about how I was diagnosed. It was a really dark time. HIV saved my life 6 months later, and then I got a job working in the field. That's what I was going to get to at some point. Was the blessing is that, like, HIV saved my life at the time when I was diagnosed. It took me a few months to get there, but it did save my life. It was a slap across the face. So do I think of myself as an HIV positive person? I mean, HIV is part of me. It's part of my story. It's part of who I am. It's part of the just like I've done drag. I have done, just like I've traveled across, to San Francisco. It's things that I've done. It's part of me. It's where I've been. But it's also given me a platform to talk to people. It's given me an opportunity to, I've had people lash out at me for being HIV positive. I've had people reach out to me because of the work that I've done and talk to me about it. And what I discovered when people lash out at me is that usually it's because they're recently diagnosed and they're taking out their frustration on me because of their diagnosis. And I've been able to talk to them and educate them and stuff. So I live my life openly because I, grew up scared that I would become positive. And when I did, I knew that I had to become a voice for people who were afraid to use theirs. And so I hope that I can be a beacon for people to come to and talk to. And what advice would I would give, people who are not are watching and want to talk about it, is that if reach out to anyone on this panel. Also, you know, the luxury of living in major cities is that we do have ASOs, aid service organizations. We do have a lot of support in cities. And if you don't live in a major city, there are hotlines across the country. We do have access to if you have access to the internet, there are hotlines, there are support groups, there are places that you can get information for that. But know that you're not alone. Know that if you're HIV negative and you think you're at high risk, there are places and people to talk to for that. If you're newly diagnosed, reach out to people, reach out to someone. There's so many tools on the web and there's so many tools in the city. And please, don't feel that you need to isolate and that you're alone, because you're not. You have people on this panel. There's so many resources out there, and we don't live in a time when, I don't know. Anyway, there are people out there like myself who will lend an ear and a voice to you.
Awesome. So if you want to connect with Nick on Facebook, you can do that at Nicholas Paulo. His IG is right there. I'm not even going to attempt to try to say that. And his Twitter is here as well. So again, and if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to one of the panelists, you can always submit an anonymous submission to my website. So if you go to www.overthetopliving.com, scroll to the bottom, you can be anonymous and you can ask a question. I will forward it to the appropriate person so that we can connect with you. I don't want anyone's desire to be anonymous to be a reason why you don't connect with us. You can go to my website and put your name is Jane Doe and your email address is none@none.com. Like, you don't have to, like, it's just, don't let that be a reason that you don't connect. So again, if you want to connect with Nick, you can do so on Facebook, here on IG, and also on Twitter. And so last but not least, I want to bring Todd as we close our show out this evening, because I do want to remind you again, we are launching our book club, okay? And, my grandmother used to have a saying, take your time and hurry up, because these spots will not last long. And I'm ready to finish the book. So I need y'all I literally have paused reading the book to allow you guys to join. So Todd, what does it mean to you to be a person living with HIV? And what advice do you have to the person that's watching you this evening?
Well, first off, I want to thank you for being here. I mean, I feel just honored, and actually it's a privilege to talk to you. 2 years ago, I wouldn't have this conversation. We hide in so many ways and in so many different places. And I talk a lot about it in the book. There's so many things that we touched on today that I go into great detail. I will say this, my faith gives me hope. And I ran from that. I was Catholic. That was part of the shame and guilt that I lived with, and I detached myself from that. But I will say this, your diagnosis, that HIV is yours now. It's part of your DNA. It is who you are. You are whole and complete and lacking nothing. You are a beautiful creature, just as you are. And to love you means you have to love all back. And someone will love you. We love you. And it may be a little difficult, may take you a little more time to get to that place of where you love yourself and where you feel like you are enough and you get past the poison, you get past that fear. We will help you. There are people to help you. The Southwest Center for AIDS in Phoenix is amazing. The T in Phoenix is a spinoff of that. It's a group I get with and talk to weekly. We talk about everything from sex positive to diagnosis to testing, you name it. It is. Don't stop talking sex. Don't stop talking HIV. Don't stop talking healthy relationships. Just don't stop talking. Nick mentioned isolation. That's one of the ways we hide. We also exaggerate. We also overachieve. And I talk about that in the book a lot. I've gone through these things and I've had a lot of these experiences and God has kind of brought me through that. And I share it with you with no victim in it, only victory.
I love it.
Yeah, only victory.
So I want to invite you guys all And I'm consciously working on that thing, guys. I want to invite all of you to visit Todd's website at iamtoddkane.com/book. Okay? /book. Pick up your copy of Hide and Seek, There's No Truth in Fear. We want you to have your copies by Wednesday so we can add you to our exclusive Facebook group and that we can really begin to do some of this work and just build a sense of community. So as we close the show out, wait, we'll go back. I do just want to thank again our sponsor for the evening, Juicy Beauty Bundles, Lashes by Juicy Beauty Bundles, which features premium mink eyelashes. They're available in 2 styles. They have the Sinea, which is set of 2, and they also have the Mimi, which is set of 2. For any pricing and to see what they have to offer, we invite you to go to juicybeauty@gmail.com. Again, I'm going to tell you, keep the spelling. It is at gmail.com. So friends, I want to thank you again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in with us tonight. This is something that was put on my heart, and I love to see the growth of it. If you or someone you know has a story that you want to share and you would like to be a guest on What's the LGBT, we invite you to contact us. You can go to our website at www.overthetopliving.com, scroll all the way to the bottom and create a submission. Or you can email me directly at norman@overthetopliving.com, or you can call the Over the Top Living office at 702-826-1299. But we want to hear your story. For all my special guests, I ask that you just hang out for a minute in the back. And y'all, I tell you this all the time. You're the shit. You are the shit. It's time for you to get up and act like it. Next week, please join us here for another edition of What's the LGBT? We are talking about the L word, honey. It is ladies' night. We're going to be bringing in the L in the LGBTQ plus community, and I'm so excited. We have special guest Jennifer Easton, Chi-Town, Juicy of Juicy Beauty Bundles, and there's a couple more guests, but you'll see the flyer out. This is going to be phenomenal. I'm really excited to have us or to be able to create a space for the ladies in our community. So friends, you already know who it is, but I don't mind giving you a slight reminder. It's your best friend, your good Judy, your next door neighbor, your niece, your nephew, your cousin. And recently I've been promoted to great auntie. My name is Norman J. Liverpool IV. Thank you for tuning in for another edition of What's the LGBT?